Good evening. I will ask you please to listen very, very carefully to the question and to the answer, because the answer applies not merely to the particular claim mentioned in this question, that as far as the class or those others who hear this will be the least important part of the question, but that the answer applies to many other problems of our existence. Now the question is this: was I right in understanding you to say that when treating a Mongol child, the one helping had to be working constantly to build up a consciousness? The Infinite Way teaches that error of any kind must be met by a realization of the presence of God. Can you explain the apparent contradiction? In other words, does Mongolism have to be treated any differently from other forms of mental deficiency? If so, would you please explain how and why? Now the answer is this: from an absolute standpoint, there is no disease. There is no reality to disease. There is no cause of disease. There is no law of disease. In the entire kingdom of God, there is no such thing as disease. Never has been, never will be. Therefore, the treatment of one claim is exactly the same as the treatment of another claim. And the treatment consists of realization. Now, the realization may take any one of a half a dozen forms. For instance, one may, through their treatment, prayer, communion, call it what you will, have a clear realization of God's presence, so definite, so clear, so complete, that all form or any form of error can dissolve in that very instant. On the other hand, the realization may not take that form. The realization may take the form of why disease has no power or no law. The thought of God, the word of God, the feel of God may not enter into the realization at all. It may just be the realization of the nothingness of error. I will illustrate that for you. In the case of a man who called on me by telephone with not only an incurable disease, but one which was supposed to be fatal within the next 72 hours. And in talking with that man on the phone, I was led to say, but there is no law of disease, is there? And he said, oh yes. Yes, that's what I'm suffering from, a law of disease. If we knew the answer to that law, we could be cured. And I said, no, there is no law of disease, because God is law, and God is spirit, and God is infinite. Therefore, all law is spiritual law, and it is infinite. And the healing took place in that very instant. 24 hours later, a hospital declared that man completely well of that disease. No, there was no realization of God there. There was the realization of there is no law but the law of God. There is no law to disease. That wiped out that belief. No. In the absolute truth, then, the realization of God, or the realization of the nothingness of disease, sin, fear, error in any form, should be sufficient to wipe out the particular claim with which you're faced. And it really makes no difference whether it is a broken bone, or whether it is a destroyed brain, or whether it is insanity, cancer, tuberculosis, or any other name that you can think of. Ah, yes, but that's the absolute. Now, what is the situation? Well, the situation is this. So far as is known, there has never been a cure of mongoloid infants in the medical world, and so far as my personal knowledge goes, there has never been a healing of it in the spiritual world either. Some cases on which I have worked the last few years have responded, and there is some measure of improvement. In one case, a boy at 9 years of age who had never been out of bed, who had never moved a muscle, who had never heard, spoken, or seen, deaf, dumb, blind, completely paralyzed since birth. In 2 years, the boy walked, spoke, saw, and heard, and he now has a teacher giving him daily instruction to bring him up to date with schoolwork. You cannot yet call it a complete healing. As far as it's gone, it's beautiful. But I took that case as an experiment, and I gave 2 full years to daily work, not once a day. Oh no. Every time I went into meditation, I took that case with me. That was an experiment. Such a thing had never before been demonstrated to my knowledge. Certainly I have no knowledge of any other case of it. I doubt that you have. And I'm not satisfied yet that the case is complete. I am satisfied that many, many times I had complete realization, but the baby didn't spring up instantly. Over and over and over again. There have been a couple of other similar cases in which I have wonderful reports of improvement, but not complete healing, and I took those cases as experiments. And I have worked with them 2 and 3 years, day in and day out, day in and day out, as if they were my own children, because I want to find out why we cannot break these so-called impossible cases. Now, many years ago, my own mother was a victim of what is called migraine. Not what you call migraine headaches, but migraine. And migraine medically is incurable even to this day. No cure has been discovered for it, and nobody ever survives it, although they live a long time in misery. And we tried everything that was known to medical science and everything that was known to spiritual science to help or to heal my mother, and failed. And you can imagine that when I came into this work, I hoped the day would come when such a case would come my way, and that I would have the opportunity to work on it. And lo and behold, one of the very first cases that came to me was migraine, and it came through one of my own friends, a woman who ultimately became one of the closest friends in our entire family circle. I worked 7 years. 7 years of day and night work. 7 years of not allowing that woman out of my consciousness. And in one day she was healed. In one day after 7 years. Now, from an absolute standpoint, migraine is no different than an ordinary headache. But from the standpoint of trying to heal it, it seems to be something different. At least it was in that case. Since then, I have met 2 cases of migraine, and met them both in less than a month's time. But that was only after 7 years of constant work on the first one. In the same way, my first case of tuberculosis, I worked on 13 months. I still have the collection of letters. 1 letter a day for 13 months, every letter from 4 to 20 pages to that patient. And in 13 months I had a completely healed woman. And from that day to this, and this is going back to 1930, 31, and 2, that woman is in perfect health, has never even known a headache from that day to this. But it took 13 months of constant daily work, and not 1 treatment a day. I can tell you that for the first 13 works it was more like 20 treatments a day, almost every hour of the day and night, to bring that case through. But since that time, this is going back 1931 to the present time, in 1958, I have only lost 1 case of tuberculosis. Only 1. Every other case has been met, and I have had dozens of them in every stage. What does all this mean? It means that to us, well, I won't say to us, to me individually, and you will find it in your work individually, some claims are more important than others, or seem to be, and you will work on some claims harder than you will on others. And some will respond quickly and instantly, and others you will work on as if you were giving your lifeblood to it. Now, why that is, I do not know. All I know about cases like cancer, I don't know why anybody has cancer. To human sense, it's a horrible thing. Nobody in the history of the world has ever committed a deep enough sin to cause them to have cancer. Nobody could sin enough to deserve such a thing. Certainly nobody in the world could sin enough to deserve to be mongoloid. Then why do we have these things? I don't know. We sum up all of this error in the one term, carnal mind, mortal mind. But why one individual should suffer such a fate, I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows. I only know this. When these cases come to us, we are called upon to do the best we can to break them, to heal them, to bring them to what we know as normalcy. Now, some years ago, well, I'll go back before that, I had many mongoloid cases presented to me and never made the slightest dent in one of them. But of course I took them as a practitioner takes any case, as long as the parents or guardians want you to take the case, and usually they don't want you to take it for 10 years. And so if you don't need it in a few months or weeks, they go somewhere else. And then a doctor came to me who specialized in these cases and had a hospital for it. And he said to me, "We have no cure. I know of no cure, and yet my whole life is dedicated to this. Is there any help from a spiritual standpoint?" And I said, "I don't know. I have never healed anyone. I don't know of anyone else who has. I don't know of any records of any that have been healed. But it's worth trying." And he said, "Work with me and see what you can do." And I worked with him for 1 whole year and accomplished exactly nothing. Visible anyhow. Not a thing. And he was discouraged and gave it up. Now a few years ago, another opportunity came to me, and as I just told you, I took advantage of it to dedicate myself to those particular cases to see what could be done. And after these 2, 3, 4 years of constant work, I can say that I've seen some improvement, but only by virtue of constant work. Work hour by hour, day by day, night by night, whenever it came into consciousness. Now, last year, I had a group of students who are very close to me, who have been with me since the beginning, who know every single detail of this work, and I asked them to take some cases of mongoloid babies to see what could be done in a collective way. And I must say this, that no greater progress has been made by having a half a dozen work than was made having one work. All I can say to this question is, and I'm going to say the same to you about cancer, I'm going to say the same to you about polio. I have seen a lot of polio cases met when polio struck. I have never yet seen a child crippled with polio for some length of time restored to normalcy through spiritual help. I know it can be done. I know that any case can be done if you can dedicate your life to it. But what can be done ultimately, that nobody knows. That is a question that is still open to the spiritual world. Now you must remember this. As soon as a person finds that they have some healing gift or healing consciousness, the world starts to come to them for help, and they get busy with a practice. And therefore it is very difficult to find a practitioner who could set aside their life to heal some child, not their own. There is where the difficulty comes in. How are you going to find someone to give the time, the attention that these cases seem to require, until perhaps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these cases are so completely broken that after that they'll be as simple as a common cold? It is the first half dozen cases that are going to require consecration. Just as I am convinced that the 13 months that I gave to my first case of tuberculosis has resulted in the healing record since, so I am convinced that when anyone finally does break a case of cancer, polio, mongoloid, blue babies, once they do, the second one will come easier, the third still easier, and probably by the 10th we'll have the whole world broken and there'll be no more such cases to hold us back. Try to understand this. all healing is proportionate to your developed state of spiritual consciousness. Had you gone to Jesus Christ, with most cases, you probably would have had an instantaneous healing. It does say that he healed those born blind. It does say that he healed the mentally deficient. It does not mention cancers or polio or mongoloid babies. So we have no way of knowing whether he met those or whether he did meet them, but they weren't named. We do know this, that with God, that is, with your spiritually developed consciousness, all things are possible. But just as beginners in spiritual healing are usually called upon to meet colds and grippe or flu or some of the more minor things, and the more developed practitioners seem to get the cancer and polio cases and the difficult ones, so it is, I am convinced, that when such claims are met, as these I've mentioned, cancer, polio, mongoloid babies, they are going to be met by somebody of highly developed spiritual consciousness who is consecrating their lives to the spiritual ministry and who is maintaining the highest state of spiritual consciousness. What I would like to say is this: our greatest hope is that the mothers and fathers of polio victims, mongoloid victims, mental deformities of children, physical deformities of children, that the mothers and the fathers will dedicate themselves as much to learning spiritual healing as they would give of their dollars for medical help if medical help was available. Now, all parents would give the last dollar they have on earth to have their child healed medically, if there were any hope of them being healed medically. But in such cases as these, money is not a factor, and so healings cannot be brought about in that way. The only other alternative is for the parents to give every bit of cooperation they can, every bit of study they can, every bit of meditation and help, until they themselves develop the ability to work with their children until these cases are met. We, in the infinite way, are doing this. I cannot say to any practitioner, give up your life to healing some child you don't know. Give up your life to doing something. No, each one has to determine what they're going to do for themselves. I am doing the limit of what I can do. I have 10 students who are giving some part of every day, 7 days a week, to healing cases of mongoloid babies. 10 of my students have promised me that they will treat every single day of the week, 7 days a week, mongoloid cases. More than that I can't do. I can't ask them to give up their lives. I can't ask them to give up their entire work. But I have asked them to give up one period of their life, every single day of the week, to trying to break these cases. And that's what we're doing in the infinite way. What success we will have, I don't know. The success up to this time is very minor. In this one case, it looks pretty good. In another case also, we've had some fine response. But beyond that, the others aren't. Now, have I made it clear that as far as I understand it, there is no difference in the healing of one case than another, but the difference is the degree of realization which we attain, and the fact that attaining full realization once, twice, or three times doesn't seem to meet a lot of cases, and we have to keep doing it over and over and over, day after day after day, just as I worked 13 months with that tuberculosis case, just as I worked 7 years with the migraine case. I had many realizations during that 7 years, but it was the final one that seems to have done the work. When it did it all in one day. There never was a return after that one day. I guess it means dedication, dedication, dedication. God give us the strength, too, because there must be a day when every knee must bend. Now, this question is a natural follow-up. If children are likely to be born more perfect physically from parents well trained in metaphysics, will you please explain the meaning of there is no such thing as heredity? In the whole kingdom of God, there is no such thing as heredity, because God is your only mother and your only father. Call no man on earth your father, for one is your father. God, in the absolute truth, there is no such thing as heredity. In the human picture, there is anything and everything that you can bring to imagination. There is heredity, there is environmental disease, there is contagious disease, infectious disease, there are accidents, there is alcoholism, there is sexual abnormalities. Anything and everything happens in the human picture. Not one bit of this happens in divine consciousness, and every bit of this is nullified in spiritual consciousness. Now, there is no such thing as heredity except that which we inherit from God. That is absolute truth. On the other hand, there is no disease, no sin, no fear, but that's in the absolute, that's in spiritual consciousness. Why are we engaged in this work? Well, what does the Master say? I am come to do the will of my Father. What did he do? Heal the sick, raise the dead, reform the sinner, feed the hungry. In the human picture then, there is disease, there is sin, there is fear, there is war, there is jealousy, envy, hate, malice. In the human picture, there are the diseases caused by germs, by infection, by contagion. In the human picture, there are accidents out on the road. There are even accidents in the bathtub. We're told there are more accidents in the home than there are out on the road. Not in the absolute, not in the kingdom of God, but in human experience. Now, the Master came to do the will of the Father. And the will of the Father is that you have no disease and no sin and no fear. And therefore the Master came to give us a principle which first of all would clear away the sins and diseases of which we are now victims, and then this principle would see that we had no return of them. Now the principle that he gave us is this. There is but one power, and that power is God. And all of these sins and all of these fears, all of these diseases, infections, contagions, are not power. In the sight of God, they do not exist. Therefore, I can say, what did hinder you that you're sitting there crippled? That disease has no power, so get on your feet, rise, pick up your bed, and walk. And in that highly developed spiritual consciousness in which the Master knew no power but the power of God, even Pilate, the greatest temporal power of the Holy Lands, thou couldst have no power over me. So in the Master's consciousness, he saw the powerlessness of anything that the human mind could conceive. He saw that temporal power, whether it's the power of a Pilate, or the power of a germ, or the power of heredity, or the power of weather or of climate, he saw that these were not power. But remember this, he had this highly developed spiritual faculty that instantaneously saw the nothingness of any power but that of God. Now, in our healing work, that is exactly what takes place. And when we are somewhere near as high in that spiritual consciousness as the Master was, we have most marvelous healings. When we're not, the healings take longer. On the other hand, when we are dealing with those who are making some attempt to live spiritually, that is, loving their neighbor, praying for their enemy, forgiving 70 times 7. In other words, also living as if God were the only power, they are far easier to heal than those who are still steeped in materialism and placing their faith in material means and in material living, material pleasures. That is why in the epidemic last year of Asiatic flu, we were able to have the experience throughout this entire world of not one of our practitioners being called upon by an infinite way student for a healing of Asiatic flu. Either not one of our students contracted the disease, or they were able to meet it so quickly themselves that they didn't have to ask for help. That is what happens when we are dealing with those who are themselves forsaking material forms of life. It is much easier to lift them up, much easier to draw them out than those who cling to their material beliefs, their material faith, their material hope, their love for material living. In other words, the Master said that there must be fertile soil. If you are fertile soil, the word of truth that's dropped into your consciousness will take root, it will grow, it will develop, and it will come forth beautifully. If your consciousness is not so fully spiritually developed, fertile, you may have some temporary benefits, but they will not last. But then he said, if there is no fertility in your soil, the word will not even take root. Not even a little benefit will come forth from it. That's very clear in his teaching, that there must be fertile soil for truth to take root in. And if it isn't, nothing can happen. Now, it doesn't mean that you and I are responsible at this moment for whether or not our consciousness is fertile. Oh no, that's a matter of development. It does mean this, that when we have entered the spiritual path, that our consciousness will develop fertility in proportion to the cultivating that we do. In other words, the amount of devotion that we put into a message of truth, the amount of devotion we put in not merely to study. The study is the simplest part. It's the living of it. The living of it. If we are going to go on worshiping idols, you are not going to develop fertile soil. How do you worship idols? Well, there are those who put their entire hate or fear into germs and just can't relinquish them. And those germs really are worshipped almost like idols. Others have placed their faith and hope into some form of medicine, and they've set up medicine as if it were a god. Others have set up money. Oh, you know that it's said that money is the god of this world? It is. It is. There are more people that either love it or hate it or fear it than anything else there is in all the world. And that's idolatry, for money has no power. Money is a blank nothingness. And until you come to that realization, you're putting power in it. And by putting power in it, you're making an idol of it. So whether it's money, or whether it's medicine, or whether it's a family, or whether it's a title, whatever it is, ambition, whatever it is that you're making an idol of, that is preventing spiritual development. In proportion as we learn to relinquish hate, fear, and love of anything that has form, in that degree are we developing spiritual consciousness. When we learn to enjoy the things of this world, but neither hate them, fear them, nor love them, then we are in that state that the Master described when he said, be in the world, but not of it. Be in it, and enjoy the good things that come your way, but don't worship them. Don't fear them, don't hate them, and don't unduly love them. Then you'll find that you are obeying the most difficult commandment ever given to this earth. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. That doesn't leave any room for any other love, does it? And the first thing you know, a mother comes back and says, well, what about my children? Well, the Master must have known about children, but he still said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, with all thy might. And I suppose he meant, and then let your children come next. But no, the children must come first. And God can come next with many. With others it isn't children, it's business. Oh yes, no, I must take care of business first. Business first, and then maybe God, no, my family must come next. Then God can come third. But the Master says, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul. And then the Master, in order to rub it in, said, you must love your neighbor as yourself. And there are those who think they're really obeying that when they love the family that live next door. or when they love those of their own religious belief or those of their own nation and are willing to call that their neighbor. But that isn't the neighbor. That isn't the neighbor. The neighbor exists all around the world, and it only takes a few hours now to visit your neighbor at the other end of the world. And now he's become your really next-door neighbor just by a few hours' visit. You see, fertile soil means the ability to live in accord with the way that the Master outlined. It includes the ability to pray every single day for our enemies. It includes the ability to pray every single day for those who persecute us, for those who hate us, for those who despise us. It includes the ability to make some provision, even for those we don't like personally. So you see, when it comes to healing, you must remember that the practitioner, first of all, must learn to live so completely by love that to the highest extent possible, he or she is devoting themselves to the service of God and the neighbor. Now, for the best healing works, then, the one living the most dedicated life should be expected to do the greatest healing works. But those great healing works will best be done among those receptive and responsive. And that is why the Master said, when he was asked for help, "Do you believe that I can do this thing?" And he just didn't want an answer like, "Oh yes, sure, I believe." He didn't want an answer like that. He wanted an answer like, "I know. I know that if you speak the word, it will be done. I know that if you speak the word, it will be done." He wanted somebody to respond, to feel that which was operating in him, the presence of God, the power of God. And that's why he could say, "Leave your mother and father and sister and brother for my sake. Leave all for my sake. Sell all that you have to." He didn't want any namby-pamby business. He wasn't looking for anybody with a half-faith to follow him. He didn't want anybody with divided allegiance to follow him. And he made it very clear. How far can you go in this development of the spiritual life? Because he said very clearly, the way is straight and narrow, and few there be that enter. Do you see where healing is difficult? Healing is difficult from the practitioner's standpoint because it depends, or rather, it demands that a practitioner live up constantly to the highest of which he's capable. It doesn't mean that anybody on the face of the globe is not going to make some mistakes. But it does mean that the individual is, according to their light, living up to the highest there is and giving of their utmost. That must be the best healer. But then even the best healer can only work where somebody is meeting him halfway. Somebody is reaching out with some degree of faith, of hope, of vision, some measure of cooperation, whatever it may be. I don't know why we went so far on that. You speak about renouncing the idea of good and evil and thinking in terms of one. What about all the other pairs of opposites? Means exactly the same things. When we say good and evil, that really embraces the pairs of opposites. It really means light and dark, elation and depression, happiness and unhappiness, purity and sin. It means rising above both. And of course, they must be transcended. Otherwise, it would be an impossibility to obey the Sermon on the Mount. Now, in our Chicago 1956, Seattle 1956, Portland 1956, and I'm sure those classes or some of them are available to you, that subject is carried on for hours and hours and hours. And more especially through the Sermon on the Mount, showing you how you could not possibly live up to the Sermon on the Mount unless you transcended the pairs of opposites, for it tells you right at the start that you must resist not evil. Now, if you resist not evil, it must only be because you don't believe in two powers. Therefore, you have transcended the two powers. But if you have, you've not only risen above the belief that disease is evil, you've also risen above the belief that a lack of money is evil, or that unhappiness is evil, or aloneness is evil, or any of the other things that come in the pairs of opposites. Now, how is that accomplished? It's accomplished in this way. Now watch it, because you'll never get it in any other way. If I say to you there is a spirit in man, there is a spirit flowing out, and this spirit within me is the presence and power of God, and it is my meat, my wine, my water, my bread, the staff of life. It is life eternal. It is the resurrection. Now I say to you that the Spirit of God in me is the all power, and it is the only power. And if I need bread, it will appear on this table as bread. If I need water, it will flow as water. If I need resurrection from the dead, I will be raised up between night and morning. Regardless of my need, the Spirit that is within me will appear outwardly as it. I have transcended good and evil. You know why? Because there's nothing out here that can be good or evil to me if the Spirit of God is my own life. If the Spirit within me is infinite all, there's nothing good out here. There's nothing good out here, and there's nothing bad out here. Whatever is out here is just for use. But it, for me, is neither good nor evil. I don't need it. If it comes my way, I can use it. I don't desire it. I don't care what it is. If it's out here, if it's external to me, it's neither good nor evil. It's useful, some things, beautiful, other things, desirable, other things, companionable, yes, all of these things. But power of good or evil? No. The power of good or evil in me brings me out here all that I need. And if I need companionship, be assured, I won't desire it out here. The Spirit of God within me will bring it to me, and it will be perfect. And if I need help, it will come. And if I need money, it will come. If I need transportation, it will come. It won't be a power out here, because this is what produces it. Now, until you can see the meaning of the teaching of Jesus Christ that is built around the word I, you cannot understand how you can rise above both good and evil. But if you can understand that I am life eternal, then you'll know that there's no power of harm out here to that which I am. If I already am life eternal, nothing can make me eternal. But on the other hand, what can stop eternality? It wouldn't be eternal if it could be stopped. Therefore, I already am eternality. Nothing good can make it so. Nothing evil can prevent it being so. Is that clear? If I am the bread of life, is there any bread out here that's any good? No. Is there any absence of bread that's evil? No. Because I embody the bread of life, the staff of life. I already have it. All that the Father hath is mine, and I am it. I am the bread and the wine and the water. I am life eternal. I am the resurrection. Then what is the good and evil? Nothing. All there is the Spirit of God, which God has planted in me from the beginning before Abraham was. Do you see that? Now, then do you not see that all the money you can heap on this table can't be good or evil? Because I have no need of it. I have and that's all I have need of. And as long as I have that, if I need money tomorrow, it will be there. Therefore, I don't need it heaped up out here. I need the realization that I am all the money in the world that I'll ever need. I am the substance of all form. God planted that in me from the beginning. Therefore, money can't be good to me and money can't be evil. Money is just a thing that is provided for daily use. And it will always be provided if I am I. Because I am the bread of life, the substance of life. So it is. Can I pray for life? No. What good is prayer? The only prayer that's good is realization. Thank thee, Father, I am life eternal. I can't die. I can pass from physical sight. Judging by the history of mankind, everyone has. Probably everyone will. The greatest spiritual masters of the world did. The Hindus, the Chinese, Japanese, Hebrews, Christians, every single one in their time has at some time or other left this human scene, and probably we will too. Is that death? Then Jesus has died, Moses has died, Enoch has died, Lao Tzu has died. What a sad world that is for us. There's no hope for us if they have died. But they haven't died, because life is eternal, and they knew it. And their knowing of it was their demonstration. That brings us back to here again. There is no heredity? No. If you know it. If you don't know it, there is heredity in the human scene, and there is lack and limitation and lonesomeness and all the things that go with human life of good and evil. But all of those disappear once you know, thank you, Father. I know why Moses could say, I am that I am, and when he said it, his face shone like a light, because it was the truth. And Jesus Christ had a halo, because he knew, I am that I am. I am the bread of life. I am the way. I am the truth. I am life eternal. To know God aright is to know life eternal. But he said, I am life eternal. The only way you can know God aright is to know I. I, in the midst of me, am mighty. I, in the midst of thee, am mighty. I am thy life as well as my life. I am thy health as well as my health, for I am I. Do you see that? That's the secret of life. And without that you have nothing. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And what is the truth? I am the truth. Only don't say it to Pilate. because he'll not only crucify you, but cut your head off too. Don't go out on the street and tell it to the people on the street that I am life eternal. Don't tell them that I am the way and I am the truth. They'll lock us all up. Yes, your church here, the Church of England, last week closed its doors to a man because he said he killed cancer spiritually. And he must no more enter a Church of England and use its platform. That's what they will do to you. All churches, all governments. If you say these things aloud, Jesus said, go and tell no man what things you have seen. Go show the priests. Priests, spiritually enlightened ones. Tell them. But don't go down to the street corner and say, I am the way and the truth and the life, because it'll be a sad day for you. Our need to awaken to the spirit of truth. Does that imply that our present state of consciousness is to some extent a state of sleep? Yes, that's what the Master said. Awake, thou that sleepest. Awake, thou that sleepest, and Christ will give thee light. Awake, 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 thou that sleepest. No, I don't see any reason to attach any significance to dreams. Personally, I'm not one who dreams too much, but in my lifetime I suppose, dreamed at least 100 times. But I've never yet known one of those dreams that had any significance. At least I've never seen anything of it that would indicate that they did. They all seem to be something nonsensical that more or less arose from eating too late before going to bed or something else. But I've never had a dream in my life but one that had significance. And that one was the dream that gave me the chapter, The New Horizon, in the book, The Infinite Way. I was asleep when that came. But I knew I was asleep. And I knew it was there, hanging over my bed. And I forced myself awake. And when I awakened, it was still there. And I wrote it down. And that's the chapter, New Horizon, which is the most important chapter in all of our writings. In the book, The Infinite Way. Please explain how absent healing works without the patient knowing about it. Oh, well, I won't say about the patient knowing about it, but let's put it this way. One with God is a majority. If you ask for help, you have aligned yourself with my consciousness. Just by asking for it. Doesn't make a difference whether you ask face to face, whether you write a letter, send a telegram, or call on the telephone. The minute you think, I must call Joel, you have made yourself at one with my consciousness, and from that minute on, whatever of truth Joel realizes touches you. And therefore, you may go to your desk to write Joel a letter and find that before the letter's complete, you're healed. Or before you can get the letter into the letterbox. Other times you'll find that it didn't work that way, but you can count how many days it takes to reach me, and on that day, the day that I received it, you got your healing. In other words, at any time, from the minute that the word Joel came into your mind, from that minute on, the healing can take place. Because you have aligned yourself with Joel's consciousness of truth. And therefore, whatever of truth he realizes, now, don't misunderstand, not whatever human thought he thinks, that isn't going to touch you. Whatever spiritual truth is realized, that you are going to benefit from. Now that is the same regardless of who you turn to as a practitioner. That is why it is necessary for the practitioner to live as much as possible in spiritual consciousness, because when you reach out, if they are in spiritual consciousness, you should have an immediate healing. And as soon after as they, your practitioner, attain some measure of realization, you should benefit. Now that is the reason that we say a student should ask for their own healing. In other words, you will not get the same result by saying, will you treat my Aunt Minnie over here? She doesn't know I'm asking for help, but I want to have her healed. Don't expect her to get the same result that you would get for asking for you. She may get the result, but it will be purely through your consciousness, and that isn't always certain, because if her mind isn't open to it, it won't enter. But when you ask for a child, more especially a child not old enough to think for themselves, it's the same as if you were asking for you. And therefore, you should have wonderful result. Or, if somebody consents to your asking, your wife or your husband or your child or your parent, if they consent to it and you ask for it, it's virtually the same as if they asked for it, because they became a part of your consciousness, and then you become a part of the practitioner's consciousness, and now it's all one. But the person over here, whom you'd like to see healed, but who isn't opening themselves to it, they're the ones who have made the block. And for that reason, they may not get a healing. And yet, sometimes they do.